Get ready. Start. Sir, I beg to move that the bill to give effect to the financial proposals of the central government for the financial year 2001 to 2002 be taken into consideration. Sir, I had in my speech in the House on 24th July 2001 while presenting the budget for 2001 to 2002 explained the main features of the proposals contained in the bill. The explanatory memorandum circulated to the honorable members also contains the details of the specific provisions in the bill. I do not therefore propose to go over the detailed provisions of the bill once again. I feel gratified that the budget has evoked a great deal of interest, and during the debate on the budget in this House a number of very constructive suggestions were made by the honorable members with regard to some of the proposals contained in the bill. I have also received a large number of representations from members of the public, trade unions, voluntary organizations, professional bodies and chambers of commerce on the proposals in the bill. I express my sincere gratitude to all of them for giving us these valuable suggestions. I would like to assure the honorable members that we have given very careful consideration to all points which have been made with reference to my proposals. I had stated in my budget speech that I propose to make structural changes in our tax system. As the honorable members are aware, the government have since set up a tax reforms committee to look into the entire tax structure. The committee has been directed to submit an interim report within 3 months and the final report by February 28, 2001. While I will come before the House with comprehensive proposals after the reports have been received, I seek the indulgence of the honorable members to put forward proposals for amendment some of the provisions in the Finance Bill 2001. Taking up the provisions for direct taxes in line with our objective of giving a thrust to exports, I propose to increase the tax incentive for exporters under Section 80 HC of the Income Tax Act. Profit on sale of exim scripts will be treated as exports profit in the proportion of the export turnover to the total turnover of the business. Honorable members will recall that I had proposed certain modifications in the scheme of tax concession for tourism industry as contained in Section 80 HHD of the Income Tax Act. Under the existing provisions, this concession is available only to approved hotels, approved tour operators and travel agents actually in receipt of payment from foreign tourists in convertible foreign exchange. The modification proposed in the bill was intended to secure that this tax concession would also be available where payments for providing services to the foreign tourists are received in Indian currency from another hotel, tour operators etc. out of the funds obtained by conversion of foreign exchange received from the foreign tourists. In the various representations received by me, it has been pointed out that under the proposal in the bill, the tour operators would stand to loss. Recognizing the contribution made by the tour operators in attracting foreign tourists in this country, I wish to make it clear that extending the tax concession to hotels and travel agents will not be at the cost of our tour operators. With this end in view, I propose to move an amendment to the bill to secure that the receipts in foreign exchange eligible for computing the concession do not get reduced by the payment made to another hotel, tour operator etc. for providing service to foreign tourists. Under a proposal in the bill, the tax concession available to Indian companies in relation to receipts of royalty commission, fees and similar payments from a foreign source for export of technical know-how or rendering of services outside India is to be extended to the non-corporate resident taxpayers. I propose to further enlarge this tax concession made and make it available to technical or professional services rendered from India to concerns abroad. This will, however, not cover cases where the technical or professional service is rendered to non-residents in India. I further propose to do away with the existing requirement of obtaining prior approval of the tax authorities in respect of agreements with the foreign concerns. Under an amendment to the Income Tax Act proposed in the bill, interests on sticky loans in the case of financial institutions and banks will be charged to tax only for the year in which interest is actually received or is credited to the profit and loss account, whichever is earlier. I propose to provide that interest tax on which interests will also be charged only in the year in which the interest is actually received or is credited to the profit and loss account, whichever is earlier, by the bank or financial institutions. Honorable members would recall that I had stated in my budget speech that the credit institutions will have the freedom to pass on the burden of interest tax to the borrowers by adjusting suitably the rate of interest. It has been brought to my notice that in my cases where terms loans have already been sanctioned, the credit institutions may be able to vary the rate of interest because loan agreements do not contain a provision permitting such variation. I propose to move an amendment to the bill to provide overriding legal authority to the institutions to vary the rate of interest if they so desire in order to pass on the burden of interest tax to the borrowers. Further, I also propose to exempt from the imposition of interest tax cooperative land mortgage banks, cooperative land development banks, and cooperative societies engaged in the business of banking which cater primarily to the needs of farmers and village artisans. My proposal to extend the coverage of the expenditure tax to the expenditure incurred in restaurant providing superior facilities like air conditioning has been generally welcomed because these restaurants are patronized by the affluent sanctions of the society. It has, however, been pointed out that the criteria for identification of restaurants' expenditure in which would come within the purview of the proposed tax is cumbersome in the form in which it is contained in the bill. I therefore propose to modify it and adopt a single criterion which will be that the restaurant is air conditioned. I will be moving necessary amendment to the bill for this purpose. I propose to make some modifications to the proposals in the bill relating to deduction of tax at source from certain payments. The requirement to deduct tax from interest on bank deposits will apply only to interest on term deposits other than recurring deposits. Further, cooperative land mortgage banks, cooperative land development banks, primary agricultural credit societies, and primary credit societies will be taken out of the purview of this requirement. We would thus exclude from the ambit of tax deduction at source most of the depositors from rural areas. Further, I am sure that these modifications will ensure that the small taxpayers are not put to any harassment as a result of the proposed requirement of deduction of tax at source from bank interest and withdrawals from the National Savings Scheme. Honorable members may be aware that under an existing provision in section 197A of the Income Tax Act, individuals not having any tax liability can obtain payments without deduction of tax at source by furnishing a declaration in writing in duplicate in the prescribed form. I am directing the Income Tax Department to give wide publicity to this provision and make the requisite forms available at the bank counters. It has been brought to my notice that the proposed requirement of deducting tax at source from winnings from races and payment of commission on sale of lottery tickets would impose an onerous burden on persons responsible for paying these amounts. With a view to mitigating this hardship, I propose to provide for a threshold limit of Rs 2,500 for deducting tax at source from winnings from horse races. Tax will be deducted at source on commission etc. on sale of lottery tickets only if the payment of any time exceeds Rs 1,000. I also propose to make a clarificatory amendment to section 32 of the Income Tax Act relating to deduction for depreciation in computing business profits for tax purposes. Under the proposed amendment to depreciation will be allowed in respect of any plant and machinery, the cost of which gets amortized in one or more years under any other provision of the Income Tax Act. The bill contains a proposal to amend Section 273A of the Income Tax Act and Section 18B of the Wealth Tax Act to provide one more opportunity for disclosing uncounted income and wealth. Honorable members would agree that this facility should not be open-ended. I therefore propose to provide that it will be available only up to 31st March 2002. Stop.